Hello everyone, Sal here. So, you just pulled the trigger on a shiny new Mac Mini, a powerhouse Mac Studio, or a sleek MacBook. Your desk looks great, your ecosystem is unified, and your productivity is about to skyrocket. There's just one tiny little problem left. You need a monitor. Now, if you have $2,000 burning a hole in your pocket, you can walk right into an Apple store, buy a studio display, and call it a day. But if you're like the rest of us who prefer to keep our internal organs instead of selling them for a desktop setup, you're looking at third-party monitors. And let me tell you, stepping into the third-party monitor market as a Mac user is like walking into a psychological thriller. You see a monitor with gorgeous specs, 5-star gaming reviews, and a great price tag. You buy it, plug it into your Mac, and bam! The text looks incredibly fuzzy. The colors look like a cheap neon sign. And every time your Mac goes to sleep, your open windows shuffle around like a deck of cards. Why does this happen? Because modern macOS is a stubborn, highly specialized piece of software. It makes very specific assumptions about display hardware, and if your third-party monitor doesn't play by Apple's rules, you are going to have a bad time. Today, we are stripping away the marketing fluff and looking at the absolute reality of display physics. We're going to cover panel types, pixel density, refresh rates, hidden thermal dangers, and those incredibly annoying post-purchase quirks that nobody warns you about, along with the exact software fixes to make your third-party monitor behave exactly like an Apple display. Grab a notebook, stretch those shoulders, and let's explain exactly how to buy the perfect monitor for your Mac. Let's start with the absolute foundation of text sharpness on a Mac: pixel density and resolution scaling. Windows handles display scaling by resizing individual user interface elements. Apple does not. macOS scales text by changing the rendering resolution of the entire desktop workspace in the background. Apple's native standard is the Retina display, which targets roughly 218 pixels per inch. That's what you get on a 27-inch 5K monitor. If you buy a standard 27-inch 4K monitor, your pixel density drops to about 163 pixels per inch. To make text large enough to read comfortably, you have to go into your Mac settings and select looks like 2560 by 1440. Here is the secret quirk to show you that clean text, macOS actually renders your entire desktop canvas at a massive 5K resolution in the background, and then uses your Mac's graphics processing unit to downscale it to fit your 4K screen. On a modern Apple Silicon chip, this happens seamlessly, but it does place a minor, constant rendering load on your system memory. So, keep that scaling math in mind before we even look at screen materials. Now, let's talk panel technology. The internet loves to debate panel types, but let's break down how they actually behave next to a Mac. First up, the ancient artifact, TN panels. Twisted pneumatic. The only place a TN panel excels is raw refresh rate and pixel response speed. For a long time, competitive esports players loved them because they eliminated motion blur. But for a Mac workflow, absolutely skip them. TN panels have disastrous viewing angles. If you look at the screen even slightly off-center, the colors instantly wash out or completely invert. Whites turn dark, and dark colors turn into a ghostly silver haze. Unless your professional workflow consists entirely of playing competitive shooter games from 2012, keep TN panels far away from your desk. Next, we have VA panels. Vertical alignment. On paper, VA panels look like a massive win because they offer a fantastic native contrast ratio, usually 3000 to 1 or even 5000 to 1. Put a VA panel next to a standard office screen, and its blacks look beautifully deep and inky instead of a muddy dark gray. But here is why a VA panel is a massive letdown for professional image or video editing, color shifting, and black smearing. VA crystals block light incredibly well when you look at them completely dead center. But if your eyeline moves just 15 degrees off axis, light leaks through unevenly. Think about sitting close to a flat 27-inch monitor at your desk. You look straight at the center, but your eyes naturally view the far left and right edges at a minor angle. On a VA panel, this causes a constant gamma shift and color washout at the borders of your screen. If you drag a video timeline window or a color-shaded graphic design asset near the edge of the display, it will physically appear to change shade and lose saturation. On top of that, VA panels suffer from incredibly lazy pixel response times when transitioning from pure black to dark gray. If you use dark mode for coding or reading documents, scrolling down a page will cause the white text to leave a thick, ghostly purple or black trailing smudge across the screen. It forces your eyes to constantly micro-adjust, leading to quick eye fatigue. This brings us to the reigning champion of the desktop workspace, IPS panels. In-plane switching. While an IPS panel can't match the extreme contrast of a VA panel, it completely dominates in absolute viewing consistency. You get a flawless, uniform color field across a full 78-degree viewing angle. The color you see in the dead center is the exact color you see at the absolute edge of the glass. For editing timelines, grading images, or managing overlapping document grids, IPS remains the reliable, worry-free industry gold standard. Now, let's step into the premium tier. If you look at Apple's highest-end gear, like the premium 14-inch and 16-inch MacBook Pros or the Pro Display XDR, Apple uses a highly advanced backlighting architecture called Mini LED. Why does Apple favor Mini LED for professional computer gear? Because it strikes an elite balance between extreme contrast and sustained high brightness without any risk of hardware degradation. Apple packs up to 10,000 microscopic LEDs behind the display glass, grouped tightly into thousands of independent local dimming zones. This allows the monitor to shut off the backlight completely behind dark areas while blasting bright highlights at over 1,000 nits. However, there is a catch when you look at third-party Mini LED monitors. Apple uses highly complex, custom silicon timing controllers and proprietary software algorithms to smoothly dim those zones as your mouse moves across the screen. Budget third-party monitor brands often rely on generic, off-the-shelf scalers and feature far fewer dimming zones, sometimes only 300 to 500 zones spread across a massive 27-inch or 32-inch space. When a dimming zone is physically large, a tiny white asset like a mouse cursor or a line of text will activate a relatively large block of backlighting. This causes a highly noticeable light halo to bleed into adjacent dark areas, an artifact known as blooming. On a poorly optimized third-party Mini LED monitor, blooming looks like a harsh, visible box floating behind your mouse cursor or subtitles, making it a frustrating compromise for budget buyers. So why not just buy an OLED monitor and get perfect, pixel-level contrast with zero blooming? Well, for mixed desktop productivity and a dual Mac setup, traditional OLED is often the absolute last resort for three major reasons: text sharpness flaws, aggressive safety features, and static interface burn-in. First, the text sharpness issue is an unfixable, hardware-level limitation caused by the physical layout of the subpixels. Traditional LCD panels use a standard, predictable, vertical red-green-blue stripe layout. Every desktop operating system's text smoothing and anti-aliasing engine is explicitly written to map letters to this exact vertical pattern. Many OLED monitors use alternative structures, like triangular quantum dot OLED patterns or white OLED arrays. Because the subpixels don't line up in traditional clean stripes, the Mac's rendering engine fires the wrong colored subpixels when trying to smooth out font borders. To make matters tougher, Apple completely removed subpixel text rendering from macOS years ago, relying entirely on raw pixel density to keep fonts clear. Because a 27-inch 4K layout isn't dense enough to naturally hide those irregular pixel shapes, you get permanent microcolor fringing, faint pink, purple, or green shadows on the borders of thin text characters. Side by side with an IPS display, text on an OLED screen can look slightly fuzzy, hazy, or just a bit out of focus, causing severe eye strain during long hours of coding or writing. Second, OLED panels use organic compounds that wear out faster if run at maximum voltage across the entire screen. To protect itself, an OLED monitor utilizes an aggressive feature called an automatic brightness limiter. If you open a massive, full-screen white window, like a blank browser page or a large Google Doc, the monitor firmware instantly and dramatically dims the entire display to control heat. The moment you shrink the window down or switch back to a dark app, it snaps back to full brightness. This constant, sudden shifting of screen illumination during a standard office workflow can be incredibly jarring. Third, professional creative workflows are fundamentally defined by static user interfaces. Think about your daily environment: the fixed top macOS menu bar, the persistent lower application dock, and the rigid sidebars in editing software like Final Cut or Photoshop stay in the exact same pixels for 8 to 10 hours a day. Because OLED subpixels degrade unevenly based on usage, leaving these identical bright lines and dark gray boxes in the same spot day after day makes the display highly susceptible to permanent image burn-in over a couple of years, ruining your ability to cleanly evaluate a creative asset. While the display industry has introduced expensive fixes like tandem OLED technology, which layers two organic light-emitting structures vertically to split the electrical load and extend lifespan. These monitors command a massive price premium. They easily cost as much as, or even more than, an Apple Studio display, completely removing them from the budget-friendly category. Let's move on to color standards. When you are looking at a monitor's specifications, there is one metric you must prioritize above all else for a Mac setup: DCI P3 coverage, which Apple markets as Display P3. Since 2015, Apple has calibrated its entire ecosystem around the Display P3 color gamut. If you buy a standard budget monitor that only covers the traditional internet standard, sRGB, you are physically missing out on roughly 25% of the total color range your Mac is outputting. macOS automatically assumes it is communicating with a wide color system. Connecting a narrow sRGB display causes deep reds, rich oranges, and vibrant greens to flatten and wash out completely. To ensure absolute color consistency when tracking project assets between your MacBook screen and your external monitor, look for a panel that natively covers at least 95% of the DCI P3 spectrum with a factory color accuracy rating, or delta E, of less than 2. Next up, screen coatings and peak brightness. This choice completely dictates how your eyes handle a long day of work under your room's light sources. Matte, or anti-glare, coatings use a microscopic textured surface layer to scatter incoming light rays, effectively neutralizing reflections from open windows or overhead office lamps. It is the worry-free industry standard for long hours of text and data tracking. The trade-off is a very subtle micrograin over solid white backgrounds, but it prevents severe eye fatigue. Glossy screens, like the glass panels Apple uses, feature a perfectly polished light path. You get pristine text subpixel clarity, rich native contrast, and colors that pop dramatically because there is no diffusion layer blocking the panel. But a glossy screen acts exactly like a dark mirror. If you choose a glossy panel, its peak brightness level becomes your absolute defense mechanism against your room's environment. If a glossy display only outputs a low-end budget brightness of 250 to 300 nits, it will be completely overpowered by standard daylight, forcing you to constantly strain your eyes to look through your own reflection. For a glossy screen to be comfortable, it needs a baseline sustained output of at least 400 to 500 nits to physically overpower ambient room glare, which is exactly why Apple engines are engineered to push a massive 600 to 1000 nits of sustained brightness. Let's talk ports and connectivity next, because this is where your daily convenience is won or lost. If you are juggling a stationary Mac Mini or Mac Studio alongside a mobile MacBook, your monitor needs to act as an intelligent docking-based station. Your laptop connection requires an upstream USB-C port supporting alt mode with robust power delivery, ideally 65 to 90 watts. This allows a single USB-C cable to accept the 4K video signal while simultaneously pumping high wattage power back into your MacBook to keep it charged under heavy rendering loads, all while bridging any accessories plugged into the back of the monitor straight to your laptop. Your stationary Mac Mini can then anchor into the monitor's standard HDMI or DisplayPort input. To avoid constantly unplugging your external mouse and keyboard when switching between machines, look for a monitor with an integrated hardware KVM switch, or simplify your desk logistics entirely by utilizing multi-device Bluetooth peripherals that switch active hardware connections with a single tap on the keyboard itself. Now, let's discuss the most frequently overlooked piece of hardware on a display: the monitor stand and its physical construction. A cheap, static plastic stand forces your body to adapt to the screen, leading directly to neck fatigue and bad posture. Your factory monitor stand should ideally provide smooth mechanical height adjustments, vertical tilt to block overhead reflections, and a 90-degree pivot option to rotate the screen vertically, which is an incredible secret weapon for tracking long lines of programming text or script documentation. If a factory base takes up too much physical space on your desk, check the back of the monitor for standard 100 by 100 mm VESA mounting compatibility. Ditching the plastic stand completely and mounting the panel to an adjustable, clamp-on mechanical monitor arm completely clears your desktop real estate, giving you a perfect place to tuck your Mac Mini out of sight and cleanly park your MacBook. While we are examining physical monitor construction, let's look at a critical thermodynamic hazard: ultra-thin monitor frames with zero heat management. Many budget lifestyle brands produce model-thin displays to look sleek on your desk, completely removing physical exhaust vents or internal metal heat sinks to save space. Monitors generate substantial internal heat from their LED backlights and processing scalers, If that thermal energy is trapped inside an ultra-thin casing, it bottlenecks directly behind the fragile display panel, triggering rapid lumen degradation of the LEDs, creating cloudy bright spots, and eventually warping the optical adhesives holding the panel layers together. Always choose a monitor with a robust, thoughtfully ventilated chassis to protect your investment over long production days. This brings us to the final hurdle, the unexpected macOS software quirks that surprise almost every third-party monitor buyer. Quirk number 1 is the broken keyboard brightness keys. The moment you connect a standard third-party monitor over HDMI or USB-C, you will find that pressing the F1 and F2 brightness keys on your Apple keyboard does absolutely nothing to the external screen. This happens because macOS does not natively send display control commands to non-Apple hardware. To fix this without constantly fiddling with awkward plastic buttons underneath the monitor frame, install a free, lightweight utility app like Better Display or Display Buddy. These brilliant tools bridge the communication gap, allowing your Mac keyboard keys to seamlessly adjust your third-party monitor's backlight volume and audio levels. Quirk number 2 is the infamous amnesia wake from Sleep Window Shuffle. When your Mac enters power-saving sleep mode, it cuts the active video link. If your third-party monitor wakes up too slowly or drops its hardware handshake, macOS gets confused, assumes the display has been physically unplugged, and aggressively shuffles all your open application windows and video timelines back onto your laptop screen or into a single desktop mess. To minimize this chaos, navigate to your Mac's system settings, open the desktop and dock menu, and make sure to uncheck the box that says Displays have separate spaces. This simple adjustment helps keep your application layouts locked perfectly in place when waking up your setup. Now, before we officially wrap up, let me give you my rapid-fire recommendations on the 5 specific monitors I consider the absolute best buys for a Mac system right now. If you have an unlimited budget and want the pristine native Apple experience without any compromises, buy the Apple Studio display. It gives you that glorious 5K Retina resolution, 600 nits of sustained brightness, and a glossy finish that looks identical to your MacBook screen. If you demand that 5K Retina sharpness but refuse to pay the Apple tax, look at the Samsung Viewfinity S9. It is a premium 5K alternative that delivers incredible pixel density and features a matte display to completely kill room glare. Now, dropping into the budget 4K tier. If you want the ultimate plug-and-play Mac companion, get the BenQ MA27DU. It covers 95% of the display P3 color gamut, charges your Mac with 90 watts of power, and perfectly syncs with your Mac's keyboard brightness keys right out of the box. If you are a serious budget colorist or video editor, the LG 27UP-AT50N-W is a legendary workhorse. It gives you that essential 95% wide color gamut and supports direct hardware color calibration, so you can absolutely trust your timeline colors. Finally, if your daily work involves heavy reading, coding, or scrolling through massive script documents, get the Dell 27 Plus S2725QC. It trades wide color for a buttery smooth 120 Hz refresh rate, making your entire Mac interface feel incredibly snappy and fluid. To summarize everything we've broken down into a simple, foolproof buying blueprint, target a 27-inch 4K resolution for sharp text scaling. Stick to an IPS panel to guarantee absolute color uniformity without edge shifts or dark smearing. Lock down a display that natively targets the DCI P3 wide color gamut to seamlessly match Apple's color engine, and ensure you have a USB-C port with high wattage power delivery to handle your MacBook with a single cord. Finally, don't compromise on a robust, ventilated chassis and a VESA-ready frame to protect both your physical posture and the internal hardware components. If you keep those structural rules in mind, you can step into the monitor market with total confidence, avoid the marketing traps, and build an exceptional multi-Mac workspace that looks beautiful and performs flawlessly for years to come. I hope this breakdown completely clears up the confusion around picking a display for your Mac system. Until next time, this is Sal, signing off. Take care of your eyes, keep your workflow smooth, and I will see you all in the next video.